Your wealth was once measured by the cow in your field. Long before the clink of metal, ancient economies thrived on a system far more tangible than our abstract money. This journey uncovers the 25 most significant trade commodities that functioned as real currency, from grains of barley to blocks of salt. By the end, you will see the entire marketplace of the ancient world in a completely new light, understanding the true, surprising origins of money. How did a bag of rice fund an army, and why were seashells accepted across continents? What does it say about us that the first salaries were paid in something you could eat? What comes to mind when you think of the very first price tag? That transition from wandering to rooted life changed everything. For the first time, communities produced more than they immediately needed. A farmer's field might yield an abundance of grain, far more than his family could eat before it spoiled. Meanwhile, a potter had crafted sturdy vessels but needed food. This is where simple barter, the direct swap of one good for another, hit its limits. What if the potter didn't need grain that week but needed leather instead? The famous double coincidence of wants, where both parties desire what the other has to offer, made complex trade a tangled, inefficient web. Societies growing in size and sophistication needed a smoother system, a lubricant for the gears of commerce. They needed something everyone would accept, not for itself alone, but for the promise of what it could later be traded for. This was the birth of commodity money. The chosen item had to pass a rigorous test. It needed intrinsic value, meaning it was useful or desirable on its own, whether as food, tool, or ornament. It had to be durable enough to store value over time. It needed to be divisible so you could make change for a large purchase. And crucially, it had to be somewhat scarce but reliably available, creating a trusted standard. From the fertile floodplains of Mesopotamia, where clay tablets recorded debts in measures of barley, to the islands of the Pacific, where massive stone wheels symbolized unshakable social bonds, every culture looked to its environment for answers. The money they invented wasn't abstract. It was something you could hold, eat, wear, or use. It grounded the entire concept of value in the tangible world, revealing a profound truth. Money began not as a government decree, but as a community's shared agreement on what was truly worth wanting. This shared agreement gave rise to a powerful and elegant concept, commodity money. To understand the 25 items on our list, we first need to grasp this foundational idea. It stands in stark contrast to the money in your pocket today. Modern currency, known as fiat money, has value because a government declares it legal tender. The paper itself is nearly worthless, but we all agree to accept it based on that decree and shared trust in the system. Commodity money flipped that script entirely. Its value came from the physical substance it was made of. A coin wasn't just a token, it was a measured piece of valuable metal you could melt down and use. A sack of grain wasn't just a promise of food, it was the food itself. For any object to succeed in this role, it had to pass a series of practical tests. First, it needed durability. If your wealth rotted or crumbled within a season, it was a terrible store of value. Second, it required portability. You needed to be able to carry a meaningful amount of it to a marketplace. Third, and crucially, it had to be divisible. How do you buy a single chicken if your only form of money is a live cow? You needed a unit that could be split into smaller, standardized portions for everyday purchases. Finally, it benefited from uniformity. Each unit should be roughly equivalent in quality and value to the next, creating a reliable standard. Consider a bag of barley in ancient Mesopotamia. Each grain is a nearly perfect miniature unit. It is durable enough to store for months in a sealed container. It is portable. You can carry a week's worth of grain in a sack. It is perfectly divisible. You can measure out a handful for a loaf of bread or a single grain if you had to. and each seed is uniform. One grain of barley is functionally identical to another. This made it an ideal candidate for pricing other goods. A pot might cost 200 grains of barley, a woven blanket 500. The barley had intrinsic value as food, but it also transcended that, becoming the measuring stick for everything else in the market. It was both a consumable good and the currency used to buy it. This dual nature is the magic of commodity money. It was rooted in real, tangible utility, which is why these systems felt so stable and intuitive to the people using them. They weren't trading abstract symbols, they were trading usefulness itself. That foundational role of barley takes us to the very birthplace of recorded history. In the fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the world's first great cities rose from the mud. Here, in ancient Mesopotamia, the story of money becomes permanently etched, not in stone but in clay. The civilization's twin pillars were agriculture and administration, and they were built upon the humble grain. Barley and wheat were far more than food. They were the lifeblood of the entire social and economic system. Picture the vast temple complexes and royal palaces. Their most crucial buildings were not throne rooms, but enormous, meticulously managed granaries. These towering storehouses were the central banks of their day, holding the collective wealth of the city-state. When a laborer worked on a canal or a ziggurat, his payment was not a coin, but a daily ration of grain measured out from these stores. A scribe's salary, a soldier's stipend, even a priest's offering, all were calculated and distributed in standardized units of barley. This created a beautifully simple and stable economy. The value of everything from a plot of land to a copper tool could be expressed in so many measures of grain, but this system created a new problem, one that would spark a revolution in human communication. How do you keep track of it all? How do you record that farmer owes the temple 200 measures of barley for the loan of a plow, or that a merchant has deposited 50 measures for safekeeping? The answer emerged from the very mud they stood on. Administrators began pressing marks into soft clay tablets to denote quantities of grain. These marks evolved, becoming more sophisticated, turning into the world's first written script, cuneiform. Those earliest tablets were not epic poetry or royal decrees, they were accounting ledgers. Writing itself was invented to manage commodity money, so when you look at a cuneiform tablet, you are literally looking at an ancient bank statement. It proves that the need to track grain, this edible currency, was a primary force behind the development of bureaucracy, mathematics, and recorded history. The stability offered by this grain-based economy allowed for specialization. Not everyone had to farm because the system could reliably feed those who built, those who governed, and those who created. In this way, a sack of barley was more than just a week's meals. It was a unit of trust, a contract, and a receipt. It was the tangible seed from which the complex organism of urban civilization could grow. The granaries of Mesopotamia were not alone. From the sun-baked banks of the Nile to the fertile plains of the Yellow River, one commodity was so fundamental it became the very measure of life itself, grain. This is our first standardized trade commodity. Whether it was barley in the Near East, wheat in Egypt, or millet and rice in ancient China, grain possessed the perfect combination of traits for early money. Its value was immediate and undeniable. You could eat it to survive, plant it to ensure next year's harvest, or even brew it into beer, one of humanity's oldest and most cherished social beverages. This intrinsic utility meant everyone, from the poorest farmer to the most powerful pharaoh, understood its worth. But for grain to function as a reliable currency, societies had to solve a practical problem: standardization. How could you ensure a fair trade if my basket of wheat was larger than yours, or if my grain was mixed with chaff? The answer was the invention of precise measurement systems. In Egypt, the basic unit was the hecat, a specific volume of grain. In Mesopotamia, it was the sealer. These were not vague approximations. They were legally defined units, often verified with official stone or bronze measuring vessels kept in temples or marketplaces. This created trust. A debt of 30 hecat of emmer wheat meant the same thing in Thebes as it did in Memphis, allowing commerce to flow across great distances. Grain seasonality introduced another layer of complexity. A harvest comes once a year, but people need to eat and trade every single day. This forced the development of two revolutionary concepts: advanced storage and sophisticated accounting. Massive state-run granaries acted as the first banks. A farmer could deposit his surplus grain after the harvest, receiving a physical token, like a sealed clay bulla or a marked piece of wood, as a receipt. Later in the year, he could present that token to withdraw grain, or crucially, he could use the token itself to pay a debt to a potter or a weaver, who could then redeem it for grain. This token was a form of credit, a promise of value stored in the granary. Over time, these tokens evolved into written records on clay tablets or papyrus, creating the earliest ledgers. This system meant that vast quantities of grain could circulate as an abstract representation of wealth without the physical grain ever leaving the storage pit. It was an economic leap of staggering proportions. The control over these granary banks naturally concentrated power, fueling the rise of social stratification. Those who managed the grain, the scribes and temple priests and royal overseers, became a bureaucratic elite. The agricultural surplus, now functioning as a currency, didn't just feed cities, it built the administrative frameworks that allowed kingdoms and empires to grow. So the next time you see a loaf of bread, consider its ancient lineage. That simple nourishment was once the foundation of accounting, the engine of credit, and the physical substance that measured the wealth of nations. But grain was not the only measure of a person's worth. While a farmer's wealth was stored in the granary, a different kind of fortune walked on four legs across the open plains. Our second standardized commodity is cattle. This was wealth you could hear lowing in the field and see growing over time, a living, breathing form of capital. From the vast savannas of Africa to the sweeping steppes of Eurasia, the size of one's herd was the ultimate declaration of prosperity and social standing. The legacy of this system is embedded in our language to this day. The English word pecuniary, relating to money, comes directly from the Latin pecus, meaning cattle. Your financial vocabulary has roots in the pasture. Cattle functioned as a high-value currency, perfect for major transactions that defined a life or a community. A bride price or dowry was often paid in cattle, cementing family alliances with tangible, living assets. A victorious chieftain might demand tribute from a rival in the form of prized bulls or cows. A blood feud could be settled not with further conflict, but with the transfer of livestock, a restorative payment that literally replenished the resources of the harmed family. This was money with a pulse, and it created a deeply interconnected social fabric. Exchanging cattle was not a cold transaction. It was an act that wove people together through ongoing relationships of obligation and trust. For all its social power, cattle money presented a practical challenge grain did not. How do you make change for a cow? It was not easily divisible for small, daily market purchases. You could not cut a bull in half to buy a new cloak. This meant cattle operated at the high end of the economic scale, often alongside smaller commodity currencies like grain or tools for everyday use. Yet what cattle lacked in divisibility, they made up for with a miraculous economic feature they could appreciate. A herd was not a static pile of coins, it was a productive asset. Cows provided milk, bulls could plow fields, and crucially, they reproduced. A single cow represented not just its current value, but the promise of future calves, a natural form of interest and investment. This made cattle an incredibly durable store of wealth, one that could weather seasons and even generations if managed well. This reliance on livestock as currency fundamentally shaped entire cultures, reinforcing pastoral and nomadic lifestyles. A society's wealth was literally mobile, capable of being driven to new pastures in times of drought or conflict. It fostered a deep, intimate knowledge of animal husbandry and land management, and it created a worldview where prosperity was directly tied to the health and size of one's living community, both human and animal. The exchange of a cow was never just about the meat or the hide. It was about transferring a piece of that self-sustaining life force, a transaction that carried the weight of future growth and enduring social bonds. While cattle represented wealth on the hoof, a different kind of treasure was pulled from the earth and the sea, one so vital it was literally worth its weight in gold. Our third commodity is salt. This simple, edible mineral became one of the most powerful currencies in human history, and its legacy is etched into our language every payday. The English word salary comes directly from the Latin salarium, the special allowance given to Roman soldiers to purchase this precious substance. Think about that for a moment. The very concept of a wage, of compensation for labor, is rooted in the right to buy salt. This wasn't a trivial perk, it was a strategic necessity. In a world without refrigeration, salt was the guardian of the food supply. It cured meat, preserved fish, and pickled vegetables, turning seasonal abundance into year-round sustenance. An army that could preserve its food could march farther, campaign longer, and sustain its strength. A city with ample salt reserves could withstand sieges and feed its population through lean winters. Its value was absolute, tied directly to survival. This created a demand so universal and urgent that salt transcended its role as a mere seasoning. It became a standardized unit of trade. Its production was labor-intensive, requiring either the mining of rock salt from deep deposits or the slow, careful evaporation of seawater in vast coastal pans. This controlled scarcity, combined with relentless demand, gave salt a remarkably stable value across vast distances. Great trade routes were forged for its transport. The Via Salaria, the Salt Road, ran from the salt pans at the mouth of the Tiber all the way into the heart of Italy, its name a permanent monument to the commodity that built it. Caravans laden with blocks of compressed salt, sometimes molded into durable cakes or bars for easier handling and exchange, moved along these arteries of commerce. In parts of Africa, these salt bars were used as currency well into the modern era, traded ounce for ounce with gold in some markets. Salt's role as money reveals a profound economic truth. The best currencies often arise from non-negotiable human needs. You could choose not to buy jewelry or a finer tool, but you could not choose to forego the preservation of your food. This made salt a uniquely trusted medium. It was divisible. You could break a large block into smaller cakes or measure it by weight. It was durable, stored properly, it would last for generations. And its value was intuitively understood by everyone, from an emperor to a farmer. Its worth was not declared by a king, but by the very real threat of hunger and spoilage. So the next time you casually sprinkle salt on your meal, remember you are handling a substance that once funded legions, built roads, and served as the solid, crystalline bedrock of economies for thousands of years. It was the white gold that made the ancient world go round. But the most portable wealth was often worn on one's back. Our fourth standardized commodity is cloth and textiles, a form of money you could literally wrap around yourself. From the finely woven woolens of Babylon to the legendary silks of China, fabric transcended its practical use to become a trusted medium of exchange. It possessed a unique combination of qualities that made it ideal for trade. Textiles were highly portable. You could roll up a fortune in a bundle and carry it across continents. They were durable, lasting for years if cared for properly. Most importantly, they were divisible. A large bolt of cloth could be cut into smaller, standardized lengths for everyday purchases, solving the change-making problem that plagued cattle currency. A merchant might price a jar of oil at 1 hand's breadth of linen, or a tool at 2 measured strips of wool. The value could even be woven into the fabric itself through intricate patterns, specific dyes, or the use of rare materials like purple from the murex snail, creating a visual language of worth understood by all. This system reached a remarkable level of sophistication in the Aztec Empire of Mesoamerica. There, the standard unit was the quetzal, a plain white cotton cloak of a fixed size and quality. These cloaks functioned as the empire's everyday money. Historical records show everything from a small canoe to a load of firewood had its price in quetzal. They were even used to pay tributes to the ruling city, with thousands of cloaks flowing into the imperial warehouses as a form of taxation. This textile economy highlights a crucial, often overlooked dimension of ancient commerce, the central economic role of domestic production, work traditionally done by women. The creation of cloth, from spinning thread to weaving on a loom, was a time-intensive and skilled craft. A single finely made cloak represented dozens, even hundreds, of hours of labor. This meant the household was not just a place of consumption, but a vital production center, its output directly fueling the marketplace. The value was not merely in the raw cotton or wool, but in the craftsmanship, the artistry, and the hours of work encoded into every thread. Textile money made that invisible labor visible and quantifiable, transforming domestic skill into a legitimate, tradable asset that could support families and fund larger ventures. It connected the quiet, rhythmic work of the loom in a home to the bustling long-distance trade routes where those fabrics were exchanged for spices, metals, and other luxuries. In this way, a length of cloth was more than currency. It was a certificate of human effort, a portable piece of art and utility that carried the maker's skill into the wider world, proving that value could be woven as surely as it could be grown or mined. The threads of a cloak could weave together a local economy, but another currency traveled on ocean currents to connect entire continents. Our fifth standardized commodity is the cowrie shell, a form of money so universally accepted it became the world's first true global currency. Sourced primarily from the warm, shallow lagoons of the Maldives, these small, glossy shells possessed a magical combination of traits for ancient commerce. They were remarkably durable, surviving centuries without decay. They were beautifully uniform, each shell a similar oval shape with a porcelain-like sheen. And they were visually appealing, their smooth surface and distinctive slit making them naturally attractive for adornment. But their greatest monetary virtue was their size. They were perfect for small change, the pocket coins of the ancient world. This solved a critical problem in early economies: how to conduct the countless minor transactions of daily life, something cumbersome for bartering grain or cloth. In China, cowrie shells were used as currency for over 2,000 years, so deeply ingrained that the earliest Chinese pictographs for money and value are direct drawings of these shells. They were often drilled and strung together in standard quantities, like a string of 100 shells, creating a convenient, countable unit of account. A farmer could buy a handful of vegetables with a few shells. A fisherman could pay for repairs to his net with a string of them. From this Asian epicenter, cowries embarked on an astonishing journey. Arab and later European traders carried them across the Indian Ocean in vast quantities, shipping them to Africa where they were adopted with extraordinary enthusiasm. In West Africa, cowries became the dominant currency for centuries, used to buy everything from food in the market to paying taxes to local rulers. Their value was so stable and trusted that they even circulated alongside gold, with established exchange rates between baskets of shells and weights of precious metal. The shells traveled so far that they have been found in archaeological sites in North America, likely carried through indigenous trade networks. The story of the cowrie is a testament to the power of a shared idea. Here was a currency not imposed by an empire, but adopted by mutual consent across unimaginable distances. A merchant from Bengal and a trader in Timbuktu, who shared no common language or religion, could agree on the value of these little white shells. They facilitated trade between cultures that had no other point of contact, creating a fragile but functioning web of exchange that stretched across hemispheres. This natural, ocean-born token became a silent language of value, proving that money, at its heart, is simply a story we all agree to tell each other, a story durable and appealing enough to cross deserts and oceans on the strength of shared trust alone. The silent language of cowrie shells was one of nature's gifts, but humanity soon learned to speak a new, more potent dialect forged in fire. Our sixth standardized commodity is metal ingots and tools, a form of wealth that literally shaped the course of civilization. Before the first coin was ever struck, the value of copper, bronze, silver, and gold was already being measured and traded in the marketplace. These metals possessed an irresistible combination. They were beautiful, they were scarce, and most importantly, they were profoundly useful. A copper axe could clear a forest, a bronze plow could turn tough soil, a silver ornament could signify status, and gold's incorruptible luster made it seem touched by the divine. This intrinsic utility gave them a rock-solid foundation of value that everyone could understand, but raw, irregular lumps of ore were problematic for trade. How could you be sure of the purity or easily judge the weight? The solution was as elegant as it was practical: standardization. Societies began casting metals into predictable, recognizable forms. In the Bronze Age Mediterranean, one of the most famous trade items was the oxhide ingot, a heavy slab of copper shaped vaguely like a stretched animal hide, complete with 4 handles for easy transport by 2 people. These ingots, often weighing around 60 pounds, were the shipping containers of their day, a standardized unit that could be loaded onto ships and traded across vast sea routes from Cyprus to Crete and beyond. Their distinctive shape was a brand, an immediate signal of content and approximate value to any merchant who saw it. But the innovation did not stop with shape. The need for trust in these high-value transactions sparked a revolution in verification. Imagine you are a merchant about to accept a large silver ingot. Is it pure silver or is it mixed with cheaper lead? Does it weigh what the seller claims? To answer these questions, systems of assurance emerged. Official seals or stamps were pressed into the soft metal, often by a temple or a ruling authority, certifying its weight and fineness. These stamps were the direct ancestors of the designs we see on coins. They transferred trust from the material itself to the authority behind the mark. Smaller, more portable forms also circulated as money. Rings of bronze or gold could be worn on a cord, a wearable form of savings. Standardized axe heads, often too thin and delicate for actual use, were produced purely for trade, a symbolic representation of utility that everyone agreed had value. This metal commodity phase was the critical bridge in the story of money. It centralized immense value into incredibly durable and compact materials. A single chest of gold rings could represent the wealth of an entire village, something impossible with cartloads of grain or herds of cattle. It demanded and fostered new technologies, metallurgy, precise weighing scales, and the art of assaying. Most importantly, it conditioned the human mind to accept a stamped piece of metal as a token of value, paving the conceptual road for the final, world-changing leap, when that stamp would become a sovereign guarantee, and the ingot would shrink into a coin you could hold in the palm of your hand. That final conceptual leap from stamped ingot to coin was still centuries away, and in the meantime, other ingenious forms of money steeped in daily life. High in the mountain passes of Central Asia, caravans carried a currency you could brew. Our seventh standardized commodity is the tea brick, a form of wealth that warmed both the hands and the economy. In the vast, sparsely populated regions of Siberia, Mongolia, and Tibet, where formal minting operations were non-existent and the distances between settlements were immense, people turned to a substance that was both a cherished luxury and a practical necessity. Tea, compressed into dense, solid bricks, became the lifeblood of trade along the remote extensions of the Silk Road. These bricks were a marvel of pragmatic design. Leaves and stems were steamed, pulverized, and pressed into sturdy blocks, sometimes weighing several pounds. This process did more than just preserve the tea, it transformed it into a perfect nomadic currency. The bricks were incredibly durable, able to withstand the jostling of pack animals and the harsh climate without spoiling. They were highly portable, a single brick containing a vast number of servings in a compact, stackable form. And their value could be instantly assessed by experienced traders. The color of the brick, the texture of the leaves, and most importantly, the aroma when a small piece was scraped off, all spoke to its quality and thus its worth. A faint, musty smell might indicate an older brick of lower value, while a rich, floral scent marked a premium product. This created a self-regulating system of trust where the commodity authenticated itself. To further standardize this trust, producers often embossed their bricks with distinctive marks or symbols, a precursor to branding that guaranteed origin and quality. These stamped bricks circulated freely. A herder could use a portion of a brick to purchase a new saddle from a passing merchant. A family might pay a debt to a monastery with several whole bricks. They could even be used as a rudimentary form of banking, with high-quality bricks hoarded as a long-term store of value, much like gold bars today. The tea brick exemplifies how a specific trade ecosystem can birth its own unique monetary solution. It was a response to geography and culture, where the need for a stimulant to combat the cold and fatigue of high-altitude life merged seamlessly with the need for a reliable medium of exchange. This was money deeply embedded in ritual and community, often broken apart and shared in hospitality, its economic and social functions inseparable. In the flickering light of a yurt, as a brick was shaved into a boiling pot, the very act of preparing a drink was also an act of dividing capital, of turning stored wealth into shared warmth and conversation. It reminds us that before money became purely abstract, it was often something that sustained the body and spirit, a currency that could quite literally be consumed. The warmth of a tea brick shared in a yurt finds its counterpart in the lush, humid rainforests of Mesoamerica, with a currency you could drink. Our eighth standardized commodity is the cacao bean, the money that literally melts in your mouth. For the Maya and later the Aztec Empire, these small, almond-shaped seeds were far more than a treat. They were the official coin of the realm, a countable, portable form of wealth that powered their economies. A single bean could purchase a ripe tomato or a fresh avocado in the marketplace. A handful might buy a good blanket, and a full bag, known as a ziquipilli, could be used for major transactions like paying a fine or acquiring a piece of fine jade. Their use was so formalized that the Aztec Triple Alliance demanded tribute payments from conquered provinces in sacks of cacao beans, alongside more traditional goods like maize and cloth. This was a tax system built on chocolate. The high value of cacao was inextricably linked to its sacred and social role. The beans were not simply eaten. They were painstakingly processed into a bitter, frothy beverage, often flavored with chili, vanilla, or honey. This drink was a luxury reserved for the elite, for warriors, and for solemn religious ceremonies. Consuming it was a powerful status symbol, a direct connection to the divine. Because of this, the beans themselves absorbed that cultural prestige, their worth cemented by ritual and social exclusivity. This created a fascinating economic dynamic, where the value of money was underwritten not by a government's decree, but by a society's deepest traditions and its strict social hierarchy. Such serious value inevitably attracted fraud. Counterfeiters would carefully empty a real cacao bean shell and refill it with packed earth or clay, then seal it back up to pass as genuine currency. The existence of this ancient forgery is a powerful testament to just how vital and trusted this system was. It proves that where there is valuable money, there will be people trying to fake it, a truth as old as currency itself. The authorities took this crime seriously, with harsh penalties for those caught passing fake beans, because it threatened the integrity of the entire marketplace. The story of cacao currency dissolves the modern illusion that money is purely about utility. Here, value was a rich blend of scarcity, cultural ceremony, and social power, a form of wealth you could both count in a bag and savor in a cup, reminding us that the most enduring currencies are often those steeped in a people's very identity. The bitter froth of a chocolate drink was a luxury of the New World, but an even more intoxicating aroma of wealth drifted from the East. Our ninth standardized commodity is spices, the very scent of commerce itself. In the markets of ancient Rome, medieval Europe, and across the Islamic world, a sack of peppercorns or a small chest of cinnamon could command a fortune, often trading ounce for ounce with silver. Their astronomical value stemmed from a perfect storm of factors. They were exotic, arriving from mysterious, distant lands like India and the fabled Spice Islands. They were essential for preserving meat in an age before refrigeration, and they were potent status symbols, their use in food and medicine broadcasting one's refinement and access to global networks. This immense worth, packed into such small, lightweight bundles, created the ideal long-distance currency. A single ship carrying a hold of peppercorns could be worth more than an entire fleet laden with grain or timber. This incredible value-to-weight ratio meant spices could move across continents through countless middlemen and still turn a staggering profit for the final seller. To manage this high-stakes trade, merchants developed sophisticated standards. Pepper, for instance, was often traded by the bag or the barrel, with these containers themselves becoming standard units of account. A contract might stipulate payment in 10 barrels of Malabar pepper, with the quality and weight of each barrel strictly defined by merchant guilds. This standardization allowed spices to function not just as goods, but as money. Historical records show peppercorns used to pay rents on English estates, to settle dowries in Italian city-states, and even to ransom captured knights during the Crusades. The legendary wealth of Venetian merchants and Arab trading dynasties was quite literally built on these fragrant seeds and barks. Their role as currency did more than just enrich traders, it reshaped the map of the world. The desperate desire to bypass the expensive overland spice routes, controlled by powerful intermediaries, was a primary engine of the age of exploration. Monarchs funded dangerous voyages into the unknown, not merely for glory, but for a direct line to this edible gold. The search for a sea route to the spice sources of the East led to the accidental discovery of new continents and the forging of the first truly global trade circuits. So when we sprinkle pepper on a meal today, we are handling the echoes of an economic force so powerful it motivated empires, launched navies, and connected hemispheres. Spice money proves that value can be carried on the wind, a tantalizing whisper of distant lands that drove humanity to cross oceans in pursuit of flavor and fortune. The fragrant whispers of spice caravans gave way to the cold, hard reality of volcanic glass. Our 10th standardized commodity is obsidian, the sharp edge of ancient trade. This natural glass, forged in the heart of erupting volcanoes and cooled into a brittle, jet-black stone, possessed a single, transformative property. It could be fractured into edges sharper than any modern surgical steel. In a world before metal, an obsidian blade was a technological marvel, a tool that could cleanly slice hide, carve wood, and when mounted on a spear, become a formidable weapon. Its value was not symbolic, it was brutally practical, tied directly to survival, craftsmanship, and power. But obsidian's story as money begins with its scarcity. Unlike flint or chert, which could be found in many regions, High-quality obsidian flowed from only a few known volcanic vents scattered across the globe. In Anatolia, the source was the now dormant volcano of Mount Nemrut. In Mesoamerica, it was the mines of Pachuca and El Chayol. In the Pacific, it was specific islands like New Britain. This geological lottery meant that control of a source was like controlling a mint. The communities who lived near these vents held immense economic leverage. They could produce standardized cores, the rough blocks from which blades were struck, and trade them over astonishing distances. Archaeologists find Mesoamerican obsidian from Guatemalan sources in ruins hundreds of miles away in northern Mexico. In the Mediterranean, Anatolian obsidian traveled by boat to Crete and Cyprus long before the rise of empires. This trade was not haphazard. The cores themselves became the currency, uniform in size and quality, a raw material bank that craftsmen elsewhere could withdraw from. A skilled napper could predictably strike dozens of identical blades from a single, well-made core, turning one unit of imported wealth into many units of usable tool. This created a two-tier economy, the raw material as a high-value trade good, and the finished blades as a local medium of exchange. The political implications were profound. A chieftain who monopolized access to an obsidian flow could arm his warriors with superior weapons, attract the best craftsmen, and demand tribute from neighbors desperate for the material. It was a form of power as concrete as the glass itself, where technological advantage translated directly into economic and military dominance. Obsidian money teaches us that the earliest currencies were often the keys to capability. Value was not just about beauty or sustenance, but about potential, about what that object could do. In the hand of a hunter, it meant a successful kill and food for the family. In the hand of a warrior, it meant security or conquest. In the hand of a trader, it was a compact, immensely valuable cargo that could be bartered for food, cloth, or labor. The flow of this black glass across continents charts a map of ancient ambition, where the need for the sharpest edge forged some of humanity's first long-distance commercial networks, proving that sometimes the most cutting-edge technology is also the oldest form of money. The sharp, utilitarian edge of obsidian finds its perfect contrast in a currency of pure, captured light. Our 11th standardized commodity is amber, fossilized sunlight that flowed as wealth. This warm, golden resin, mined from the ancient pine forests now submerged beneath the Baltic Sea, held a magic that transcended its physical form. Washed ashore by storms or gathered from shallow seabeds, each piece was a tiny, translucent prison holding moments from a world millions of years old, sometimes preserving leaves, insects, or even feathers in perfect, eternal detail. This combination of breathtaking beauty, deep mystery, and extreme rarity made amber one of the most sought-after substances in the ancient world. Its value was multifaceted. It was a gemstone for adornment, a material for carving amulets, and to many cultures, a substance believed to hold protective or even healing properties, carrying the power of the sun within its glowing heart. For it to function as money, however, required practical form. Artisans learned to work the soft resin into standardized shapes, most commonly beads. These beads, uniform in size and drilled with a central hole, could be strung onto cords in counted lengths, creating a portable, divisible, and instantly recognizable currency. A trader from the far north could carry a necklace of 50 amber beads southward, knowing that each bead represented a unit of value that would be accepted hundreds of miles away. This demand forged one of Europe's oldest and most enduring commercial highways, the Amber Road. This was not a single path, but a vast network of trails and river routes stretching from the Baltic coast all the way to the shores of the Mediterranean. Baltic amber beads have been found in the royal tombs of Mycenaean Greece and in the burial sites of Egyptian pharaohs, a testament to the incredible distances this commodity traveled. The Amber Road was more than a trade route, it was a conduit for culture. Alongside the beads moved ideas, technologies, and artistic styles. The people controlling the sources and key points along this route amassed great influence, not through military conquest but through commercial monopoly. They established trading posts that grew into towns, and the constant flow of goods fostered diplomatic relationships between distant peoples. Amber's story reveals a profound economic driver often overshadowed by necessities like food or tools, the human hunger for beauty and meaning. Its value was not in what it could do, but in how it made people feel and what they believed it represented. A community would trade essential goods like furs, honey, or wax for these pieces of golden light, prioritizing the transcendent over the purely practical. This trade in beauty established economic corridors that outlasted empires, demonstrating that currency can be born from wonder, and that the routes we build to pursue rarity can become the very threads that weave disparate cultures into a connected world. Amber's golden glow represented wealth from distant forests, but for many communities, real prosperity walked and grazed right outside the door. Our 12th standardized commodity is livestock beyond cattle, a living, breathing portfolio of agrarian wealth. While cattle often served as the high-denomination currency for major exchanges, the economic ecosystem required smaller denominations for daily life. This is where animals like sheep, goats, pigs, and even poultry entered the marketplace, creating a flexible and deeply practical monetary ladder. Each species offered a unique bundle of resources, making them more than just a static store of value. A flock of sheep was a self-renewing economic engine. It provided annual wool for cloth, regular milk for cheese, and eventually meat and hides. Investing in a sheep was investing in a stream of future goods, a living asset that paid continuous dividends. This made them perfect for measuring long-term wealth and for transactions that built ongoing relationships, like providing a daughter's dowry in the form of a starter flock. In the epic poetry of Homer's Iliad, the ultimate values are expressed in oxen, the gold standard of the heroic age. The magnificent armor of a fallen warrior might be described as worth 9 oxen, a staggering sum. Yet for more mundane affairs, the value ladder descended. A skilled slave might be traded for 4 oxen, but a simpler transaction, perhaps for a good cloak or a bronze tripod, could be priced at a handful of goats or several sheep. This tiered system allowed for incredible economic precision. You could not make change for an ox, but you could certainly combine 2 goats and 3 sheep to match its value in a complex barter. It reflected a world where every household understood the relative worth of creatures based on their age, health, and productive potential. A milking goat was worth more than a young kid, a breeding sow more than a piglet ready for fattening. This use of diverse livestock as money paints a vivid picture of an economy completely integrated with the rhythms of nature. Wealth was biological capital, directly tied to the fertility of the land and the skill of the herdsman. It was wealth that needed care, that could fall ill, that could multiply. This fostered a profound, intimate responsibility. Managing your money meant ensuring your animals had pasture and water, protecting them from predators and breeding them wisely. Your financial security was literally alive, connecting your economic fate to the health of the environment in the most direct way possible. It was a system that rewarded patience, knowledge, and stewardship, reminding us that the earliest forms of capital were not cold and inert, but warm, breathing, and entirely dependent on the delicate balance of life. The living wealth of the flock finds its echo in the deep ocean's most perilous treasure. Our 13th standardized commodity is the whale tooth, a currency carved from courage and ceremony. Across the scattered islands of the Pacific, particularly in Fiji, the polished teeth of the sperm whale, known as tabua, held a power far beyond any marketplace. These were not coins for buying bread or fish. They were the sacred tokens of social life, a high-value currency reserved for the moments that defined a community. Each tabua was a masterpiece of transformation. A raw, conical tooth, often stained with age, would be carefully smoothed, oiled, and polished to a deep, warm luster, then drilled at the root and strung with braided coconut fiber cord. Its value was forged from a potent triad of scarcity, danger, and profound cultural belief. Sperm whales were majestic, deep-diving creatures, and hunting them from outrigger canoes with hand-thrown harpoons was among the most dangerous endeavors a person could undertake. A single tooth represented that confrontation with the immense power of the sea, a tangible piece of a hunter's bravery and skill. This inherent risk, coupled with the limited number of teeth a single whale could provide, made tabua naturally scarce and prestigious. Their primary function was in the ceremonial exchanges that wove the social fabric. Presenting a tabua was an act of immense significance. It was the essential item in negotiating a marriage, offered as a bride price to honor the family of the bride and formally unite two lineages. It could be given to atone for a serious transgression, to heal a rift between clans, or to formally request a favor from a high chief. In these moments, the tabua was not a purchase, it was a pledge, a physical embodiment of respect, apology, or alliance. The exchange itself was a slow, ritualized dance of presentation and acceptance, with specific protocols governing how the cord was held and how the tooth was received. To refuse a properly offered tabua was virtually unthinkable, as it would sever the social bond it was meant to create or restore. This system illustrates a fundamental truth about money's origins. Its deepest roots are often social, not commercial. The tabua stored and transferred social capital, trust, and obligation. Its value was agreed upon by the entire community and was immutable within that cultural context. While a European trader might see only a curious curio within Fijian society, that same tooth could settle a dispute that might otherwise lead to conflict, or secure a union that would strengthen a village for generations. Even today, tabua are cherished heirlooms brought out for major life events, connecting modern generations to ancient protocols. They remind us that before money could buy things, it was used to buy peace, forge family, and cement honor, proving that the most durable currencies are those that carry the weight of a people's deepest values. The ceremonial power of the whale tooth finds a dark, metallic counterpart across the Atlantic. Our 14th standardized commodity is the manilla, a form of ring money whose very shape became a chain. These distinctive open bracelets, crafted from bronze, copper, or brass, were not born from local tradition but from distant forges in Europe, primarily in cities like Birmingham and Amsterdam. From the 16th century onward, they were produced by the millions not as art, but as a manufactured currency designed for one purpose: to control commerce with West Africa. Their design was brutally pragmatic, a heavy, horseshoe-shaped ring with flared ends, easy to stack, transport, and weigh. Their value was straightforward, determined by the weight and purity of the metal itself, creating a standard that European traders could mass-produce and African merchants could trust based on the tangible quality of the material. In many West African societies, particularly among the Igbo and the Edo of the Benin Kingdom, rings of similar form had long been used in local trade and as ceremonial objects. The European Manillas deliberately mimicked and then flooded this existing aesthetic, inserting themselves into the economic bloodstream of the region. They became the primary currency for purchasing palm oil, ivory, and pepper. Tragically, they also became the chillingly efficient currency for a far more horrific trade. Manillas were used to pay for individuals captured and sold into the transatlantic slave trade, reducing human lives to a transaction measured in pounds of metal. This history forces us to confront a grim evolution of commodity money. Here, currency was not an organic outgrowth of a community's needs, but a tool of economic imperialism, manufactured abroad to create dependency and facilitate extraction on a catastrophic scale. The Manillas' journey from European factory to African coast to plantation in the Americas maps a triangle of profound suffering. Its legacy is a stark lesson in how the very mechanism of trade, the medium of exchange we invent, can be weaponized. The Manila was more than money. It was an instrument that linked the desire for profit in one continent to the devastation of communities in another, reminding us that the objects we agree to value can carry not just economic weight, but the heaviest burdens of history. The heavy, metallic ring of the Manila gave way to a softer, more intricate sound in the forests of the Northeast, the gentle clatter of shell against shell. Our 15th standardized commodity is wampum, the beaded belt of North America. For the indigenous peoples of the northeastern woodlands, like the Haudenosaunee and the Algonquian nations, these carefully crafted beads, made from the purple and white inner spirals of the quahog clam shell, held a significance that wove together the practical, the political, and the sacred. Each bead was a feat of patient labor, drilled with a stone tool and polished on sandstone until smooth, transforming a piece of the sea into a durable, countable unit. But wampum's true power was unlocked when the beads were woven together with sinew or plant fiber into wide, patterned belts. These were not mere jewelry, they were living documents. The patterns woven into a belt could record the terms of a binding treaty between nations, narrate a pivotal historical event, or convey a message of condolence or alliance. A belt presented in council was a physical contract, its intricate design a mnemonic device that allowed trained speakers to recall every clause and promise. The beads themselves had a clear economic hierarchy. The purple beads, derived from a specific, rarer part of the clam shell, were worth roughly twice as much as the white beads. This created a binary system where strings of a certain length, often measured by the fathom, could be used for everyday trade, purchasing pelts, tools, or food in a network of mutual exchange that long predated European contact. When Dutch and English colonists arrived, they quickly recognized wampum's established value and adopted it as a vital medium of exchange, using it to trade for beaver pelts and other goods. They even established workshops to mass-produce their own versions, attempting to industrialize this shell-based economy. But in doing so, they fundamentally misunderstood its core nature. To the colonists, wampum was simply shell money, a primitive coin. To the indigenous nations, it was a profound technology of memory and relationship. A treaty belt stored the words spoken when it was exchanged, its continued possession a reminder of the promises made. To accept or present a belt was to participate in a ceremony of immense social weight. This divergence highlights a central theme. The deepest currencies are carriers of information and cultural memory. The value of wampum was not just in the labor of its making or the beauty of its colors, but in the stories it could hold and the agreements it could make permanent. It was a currency that could literally speak, its woven patterns a silent language of law and history, proving that the most trusted forms of wealth are those that bind a community together with threads of shared meaning and mutual obligation. While wampum belts held the memory of treaties, another grain was quietly measuring the strength of empires in the East. Our 16th standardized commodity is rice, the foundational currency that fed entire social structures. In feudal Japan, the entire economy, from a peasant's meal to a warlord's ambition, was quantified in a single unit, the koku. This was not a coin or a weight, but a volume, defined as the amount of rice theoretically needed to sustain one adult for a full year. The koku became the absolute measure of all things. A samurai's status and loyalty were not paid in gold, but in an annual stipend of so many koku of rice, drawn from his lord's domain. The wealth of a great daimyo, a regional ruler, was expressed in the productive output of his land, stated plainly as a yield of hundreds of thousands of koku. This system turned agriculture into a direct expression of political and military power, Control the paddies, and you controlled the currency that paid the armies and fed the bureaucrats. The logistical challenge of this rice-based economy sparked financial innovation. Transporting vast quantities of heavy grain across mountainous terrain was slow and risky. The solution emerged in the bustling rice markets of Osaka and Edo. Central granaries would store the rice, and instead of moving the physical grain for every transaction, they issued paper certificates. These notes were promises, guarantees that a specific amount of rice was held in reserve and could be claimed by the bearer. These rice warehouse receipts began to circulate freely. A merchant could use a certificate to pay a supplier, who could then use it to pay a shipbuilder without a single sack of rice ever changing hands. This was an early, robust form of paper money, its value secured not by a government's decree, but by the tangible, edible wealth sitting in a storehouse. The entire social pyramid rested on this edible foundation. Peasants worked the land to produce the koku that supported the samurai class, who in turn protected the domain that produced the rice. It was a closed, self-referential loop of value where food was directly convertible into military service and social order. This demonstrates with stunning clarity how a civilization can build its most complex institutions upon the simplest of necessities. The rice standard did more than facilitate trade. It provided a common language for quantifying power, obligation, and survival, proving that the most effective currencies are often those that root abstract value in the very substance of life itself. The transformation of rock into wealth required a mastery of fire. Our 17th standardized commodity is iron in unusual forms, where the currency itself was a promise of future harvests and security. Across the fertile highlands of the Great Lakes region of Africa, among peoples like the Luo, the blacksmith's forge was the heart of economic creation. Here, iron was not traded as shapeless lumps of ore, but was carefully smelted and hammered into objects of both profound utility and accepted value. Standardized hoe blades, spear points, and particularly distinctive cross-shaped ingots circulated as a trusted, durable form of money. These were not merely tools waiting to be used, they were stores of wealth that could be counted, stacked, and exchanged. A man might save a bundle of these iron crosses to one day purchase a prized bull, or present a collection of finely made spear blades as bride wealth to a family, cementing an alliance with the very substance of strength and provision. The value embedded in these objects was a compound of material and skill. Iron smelting was a sacred, technical art, often shrouded in ritual and closely guarded knowledge. The smith controlled the magical transformation of earth into metal, a process that required precise control of temperature, the right charcoal, and an understanding of the spirits of the forge. This meant the blacksmith was far more than a craftsman, he was a creator of capital. In his hands, common stone became the backbone of the local economy. He determined the quality, the weight, and the form of the currency, making him a central figure of both economic and spiritual authority, a banker who minted wealth from fire and earth. This system created a direct, tangible link between technological innovation and social power. A community with skilled smiths and access to good ore deposits held a significant economic advantage. Their wealth was not abstract, it was something that could clear new fields for planting, defend the village from threats, or be traded far afield for goods not available locally. The iron object as money beautifully encapsulates a principle we've seen again and again. The most trusted currencies are those that hold a clear, functional promise for the future. A hoe blade was a guarantee of future food, a spear point a guarantee of safety, and an ingot was a compact reserve of that potential, ready to be shaped into whatever necessity or opportunity demanded. It was an economy built not on speculation, but on the assured application of human skill to the raw materials of the earth. A single feather cloak required the lives of thousands of birds. Our 18th standardized commodity is feathers, the lightest and most resplendent currency of all. In the Polynesian world, particularly in the Hawaiian Islands, wealth was not measured by what you could hold in your hand, but by what you could wear on your shoulders. The ahu ula, the magnificent feather cloaks and capes of the alii, the ruling class, were masterpieces of impossible scarcity and painstaking artistry. These garments were not for common trade in the marketplace. You could not buy a canoe with a patch of feathers. Instead, they operated as the highest denomination currency imaginable, reserved for the most critical exchanges of power. Their creation was an epic undertaking. Teams of skilled trappers would venture into the high mountain forests, using specialized snares and sticky sap to capture specific, tiny honeycreepers and honeyeaters, birds like the now extinct O and the mamo. A single cloak might demand the feathers of tens of thousands of these creatures, each bird yielding just a few precious, vibrant yellow or crimson plumes before being released. The red feathers from the aiui and a papain and the rare yellow ones were collected over generations, stored in special gourds, and eventually handed over to master artisans who would tie them, one by one, onto a fine netted base of alona fiber. The result was a flowing, weightless garment that shimmered like living fire or sunlight, a cape that conferred divine status upon its wearer. This was currency in its most ceremonial form. A great cloak was a political instrument. It could be given as a gift to a visiting chief from another island, a gesture of immense respect and alliance that solidified a peace treaty or secured military support. To receive such a gift was to be bound in a relationship of profound obligation. The value was not in any practical use. A feather cloak provided no warmth in the tropical climate. Its worth was a pure distillation of concentrated labor, exclusive access to a vanishing resource, and supreme artistic skill. It represented command over both human effort and the natural world. The ahu ula demonstrates that money can exist entirely outside the realm of utility. Its purpose was to communicate, to awe, and to legitimize. Wearing it was a walking declaration of authority, a visual proof that the chief commanded the labor of countless specialists and controlled the sacred spaces where the treasured birds dwelled. This feather money stored and displayed social and political capital in its most dazzling form, reminding us that sometimes the most powerful currencies are those that hold no value at all, except the value we collectively agree to see shining within them. The shimmering cloak of feathers represented a currency of pure prestige, but another form of wealth flowed from the barrel, promising a different kind of transformation. Our 19th standardized commodity is alcohol, the liquid asset that lubricated societies on the edge. In places where formal minting was a distant concept, or where hard labor demanded an equally hard reward, distilled spirits and strong beer stepped in as a trusted, tangible medium of exchange. This was money you could drink, a currency that stored its value in the promise of warmth, camaraderie, or temporary relief. In colonial America, where British coinage was scarce and barter was king, rum became the lifeblood of commerce. It was produced in vast quantities in the Caribbean and New England, and its high alcohol content made it durable for transport and storage. A farmer might pay a carpenter for a new barn door with a gallon of rum. A ledger from a frontier trading post might list a pound of nails as costing a quart of the spirit. Its value was instantly recognizable and universally desired, creating a stable, if spirited, economy. This practice had ancient roots. Thousands of years earlier, along the Tigris and Euphrates, workers building the great ziggurats of Mesopotamia were paid in daily rations of beer. Cuneiform tablets detail these payments with bureaucratic precision, showing that beer was not a casual perk but a calculated part of the wage, essential for both calories and morale in a demanding climate. The system worked because alcohol fulfilled a unique economic niche. Its value was driven by immediate, consumable demand. Unlike a bar of iron that might sit for years, a barrel of rum had a predictable and eager market. This made it a fantastically reliable driver of commerce. To standardize this liquid currency, societies relied on trusted containers. The barrel, the jug, the amphora, these were not just storage, they were the denominations. A hogshead of rum or an amphora of wine became a unit of account, their sizes regulated by custom or law to ensure that when you promised a jug, you delivered a known quantity. The use of alcohol as money reveals a profound layer of human motivation beyond mere survival. It speaks to our desire for social bonding, for celebration, and for a brief respite from hardship. In a frontier settlement or on a scorching Mesopotamian worksite, this liquid asset offered something that grain or cloth could not, a temporary alteration of the everyday. It was a currency that acknowledged the full spectrum of human need, valuing not just the body's nourishment but also the spirit's occasional yearning for release. This reminds us that the objects we choose as money are mirrors, reflecting what a society truly values, craves, and collectively agrees is worth the labor of another. The shimmering promise of a feather cloak or the warming burn of rum found its most fundamental counterpart in a simpler, sturdier form of wealth. Our 20th standardized commodity is dried fish, protein preserved as payment. In every society built along a coastline or a major river, from the stormy fjords of the Vikings to the sun-drenched atolls of Polynesia, the ability to capture and preserve the bounty of the water was a direct line to economic stability. Fresh fish spoils within days, but through the ancient arts of drying, smoking, or salting, a seasonal catch could be transformed into a durable, lightweight, and highly nutritious store of value. This preserved protein became a currency you could count, stack, and save, turning a daily necessity into the backbone of trade. The process itself was an investment in future security. Fish were carefully cleaned, split open, and then exposed to the wind and cold air in the north, or the sun and salt in the tropics, until all moisture was removed. The result was a rock-hard, virtually indestructible slab that could last for years if kept dry. This solved the critical problem of seasonality and storage. A successful summer fishing expedition could now fund a family through a long, lean winter, not just as food but as a tradable asset. When the grain ran low, a portion of the dried fish stash could be taken to a neighboring village to barter for pottery, tools, or cloth. Its value was universally understood, grounded in the undeniable need for dietary protein to sustain health and strength. This system reached a remarkable level of economic sophistication in the North Atlantic. In medieval Iceland, the export of stockfish or wind-dried cod was the engine of the entire economy. These stiff, board-like fish were produced in massive quantities, bundled together, and shipped to markets across Europe. The stockfish was so reliable and standardized that it became a unit of account. The value of other goods, from wool to imported timber, could be expressed in terms of so many fish. A saga might record that a farmer paid for a new boat with a cargo of dried cod, a transaction as clear and accepted as paying with silver coins elsewhere. This practice turned the treacherous North Sea into a highway of commerce, with preserved protein serving as the currency that connected remote islands to continental trade networks. Dried fish money illustrates a profound economic truth with elegant simplicity. The most successful early currencies often emerged from the most non-negotiable human requirements. Just as grain met the need for carbohydrates, dried fish met the critical need for protein. It was a form of wealth that directly addressed survival, making its acceptance almost instinctual. It was perfectly divisible. A large stockfish could be broken into smaller pieces for a day's meal or a minor purchase. It was portable, with bundles easily carried by individuals or loaded onto ships. And its production was a democratizing force, accessible to any family with fishing skills and access to the shore, not just to elites who controlled mines or fertile land. In a world of uncertainty, storing your wealth as dried fish meant you were literally saving for a rainy day. preserving the energy of the sea to fuel the future of your community, one tangible, edible piece at a time. The dried fish sustaining northern economies could not grow in the warm, fertile soil of a new world, where a different leaf took root as the measure of all value. Our 21st standardized commodity is tobacco, the fragrant leaf that bankrolled an entire colony. In the early 1600s, the fledgling English settlement at Jamestown, Virginia, was on the brink of failure, its settlers struggling to find an export that could justify the venture's immense cost. Then they learned to cultivate tobacco from local communities, and everything changed. The leaf's soaring popularity in Europe created an instant, ravenous market. But the colonies faced a chronic shortage of the one thing needed to facilitate this boom: actual coinage. English pounds and shillings were scarce, and bartering for every nail, plough, or bolt of cloth was impossibly cumbersome. The colonists, in a moment of pure economic pragmatism, turned to what they had in overwhelming abundance. They made tobacco itself into money. The Virginia Assembly passed a series of laws beginning in 1619, formally declaring tobacco legal tender for all debts, public and private. A farmer could pay his taxes with it, a laborer could receive his wages in it, and a fine from the local court could be settled with so many pounds of cured leaf. For this to function, they had to solve the problem of trust and standardization. Not all tobacco was equal. The system they developed was remarkably sophisticated. Public warehouses, called inspection stations, were established at key river ports. Planters would bring their harvested, dried tobacco to these warehouses, where official inspectors would grade it for quality, separating the sweet-scented leaf from the harsh, inferior grades. The approved tobacco was then packed into large, standardized barrels called hogsheads, each holding roughly 1,000 pounds. The warehouse keeper would then issue a paper receipt to the planter, stating the exact weight and grade of the tobacco now stored under the colony's guarantee. This receipt, this slip of paper, became the real currency. It was far easier to carry a receipt for 500 pounds of tobacco than to haul the actual hogshead to a distant marketplace. These receipts circulated freely, handed from one person to another to settle accounts, functioning as fully transferable banknotes. A merchant in Williamsburg could accept a receipt as payment for imported textiles, confident he could either redeem it for the physical tobacco to ship to London or use the receipt itself to pay his own local suppliers. It was an elegant, self-contained financial system, but it had a fatal flaw. Its value was hitched directly to the volatility of nature and the market. The entire money supply of Virginia waxed and waned with each growing season. A hurricane, a drought, or a blight could devastate the crop, causing a sudden, severe contraction in the amount of tobacco, and thus money in circulation. This led to painful deflation, where the value of each remaining pound of leaf skyrocketed, but few had any to spend, crippling commerce. Conversely, a series of bumper harvests could flood the warehouses, causing the value of tobacco to plummet. A debt contracted when tobacco was scarce and valuable might be repaid when it was abundant and cheap, a form of early inflation that could ruin creditors. This roller coaster tied the colony's fate to a single, exhausting cycle. Every economic decision, from planting food to building homes, was weighed against the relentless demand for tobacco. It encouraged a voracious appetite for land, leading to rapid expansion and conflict, and it cemented a social structure dependent on intensive, large-scale cultivation. The tobacco standard was a brilliant, desperate adaptation that built a colony, yet it also locked that colony into a precarious monoculture, demonstrating with stark clarity how the commodity you choose as money doesn't just facilitate your economy, it ultimately dictates its shape, its risks, and its very soul. While tobacco leaves bankrolled a colony, a more luxurious thread wove together the empires of antiquity. 22nd commodity, silk, the fabric of high finance. In the halls of Chinese emperors and the bustling caravanserais of Central Asia, this shimmering cloth transcended adornment to become the ultimate portable wealth. A single bolt of silk, lightweight and virtually non-perishable, could be worth a fortune in grain or livestock, making it the perfect currency for high-stakes diplomacy and international trade. The Chinese state understood this power intimately. For centuries, they paid their frontier troops and high-ranking officials not in cumbersome coins, but in measured lengths of this precious fabric. It was a salary that doubled as a uniform, a store of value, and a statement of imperial prestige all in one. This system worked because silk's value was guaranteed by more than just beauty. It was enforced by the most stringent state monopoly in the ancient world. The secrets of sericulture, the cultivation of silkworms and the weaving of their threads, were guarded as closely as any military secret. From the mulberry groves to the imperial looms, every step was controlled, ensuring both exceptional quality and deliberate scarcity. This artificial rarity, combined with the immense labor required, gave silk a rock-solid, predictable value that could be trusted across continents. That trust fueled the legendary Silk Road. A merchant from Chang'an did not need to carry heavy chests of gold across the treacherous Taklamakan desert. Instead, his caravan was laden with bolts of silk, a compact treasury. In the markets of Samarkand or Baghdad, he could trade a single bolt for Persian silverwork, Central Asian horses, or Mediterranean glass. Further west, in Rome, the desire for this luxurious cloth was so intense it caused a constant drain of gold and silver from the empire, a trade deficit that worried Roman senators. Silk became the gold standard for luxury, a currency whose value was recognized from the palaces of Persia to the forums of Rome. This role underscores a critical economic principle. Luxury goods with extreme value density are engines of long-distance trade. Silk proved that money did not have to be born from necessity alone. It could arise from desire, from the universal human yearning for beauty, softness, and status. For elites and states, it acted as a supremely stable store of value and a diplomatic tool. A gift of silk to a foreign ruler was not merely a present, it was a calculated transfer of capital, a signal of respect woven into every thread. It allowed for the silent, elegant movement of immense wealth across mountains and deserts, proving that sometimes the strongest currency is also the most delicate. The delicate threads of silk connected empires, but the first networks of trade were hewn from something far more rugged. Our 23rd standardized commodity is the stone tool, a form of money forged from flint and faith. Across Neolithic Europe, from the rolling hills of Britain to the plains of Poland, communities were bound together not by written contracts, but by the circulation of remarkably uniform axe heads. These were not the rough, practical tools used for chopping firewood at home. They were objects of extraordinary craftsmanship, often made from distinctive, high-quality stones sourced from a few legendary quarries. The most famous of these is the greenstone source in Great Langdale in the English Lake District. From this remote mountain outcrop, skilled makers produced polished axe heads of a specific shape and hue, which then traveled through hand-to-hand exchange over distances of hundreds of miles. Archaeologists find these Langdale axes in ritual sites and settlements far to the south and east, far from their origin. Their journey tells a compelling story. Many of these traded axes are astonishingly large, thin, and beautifully finished, making them impractical for the hard work of felling trees. Their true purpose appears to have been symbolic. They were a form of wealth, a token of connection, and a standardized unit of value that could be understood across different cultures and languages. The production was almost industrial in its consistency. At the quarry sites, workshops turned out axe heads in a recognizable, branded style. This consistency was the key to trust. A person in southern England receiving a Langdale axe knew its provenance, its quality, and by extension, its worth. It was a guaranteed product, like a mint mark on a coin, where the source itself certified the value. This created one of humanity's first large-scale economic networks, a web of obligation and exchange that moved these polished stones across the landscape. They likely served in critical social transactions, perhaps as bride wealth, as gifts to forge alliances between clans, or as offerings to the earth. Their value was a fusion of the material's rarity, the immense skill required to shape it without metal tools, and the powerful story of its distant origin. In a world without writing, these axes were a silent language. Holding one was holding a piece of a distant mountain, a connection to a wider community, and a share in a shared system of meaning. They transformed a functional object into a social currency, proving that long before gold or silver, we learned to trade in trust, shaped from stone and polished by human hands. The polished stone axe was a currency born of the earth, but the next was forged in fire and human ingenuity. Our 24th standardized commodity is the glass bead, a manufactured sparkle that became a global tender. Long before they were trinkets, these tiny, colorful spheres were serious money, their value flowing from the alchemy of the furnace. In ancient Egypt, artisans crafted intricate beads from colored glass, a technology so advanced it seemed like magic. The secret lay in achieving vibrant, consistent colors, using minerals like cobalt for deep blue or copper for a rich turquoise, hues that nature rarely provided in such pure, durable form. This ability to create permanent, portable beauty on demand made glass beads a coveted store of value across the ancient Mediterranean and Near East. The process was labor-intensive, requiring precise control of temperature and chemistry, turning sand and minerals into a lustrous, solid gem. Each bead represented not just material, but specialized knowledge, a form of condensed technological prestige. This tradition of glass as currency reached its zenith in the Renaissance workshops of Venice, particularly on the island of Murano. There, master glassmakers, isolated to protect their secrets, perfected the art of producing millions of uniform beads in a stunning palette. These weren't just for necklaces, they were produced with a specific economic purpose, as trade goods. When European merchant ships began arriving on the coasts of West Africa and the Americas, they carried chests of these Venetian beads alongside other commodities. To the traders, they were a cheap, mass-produced item, but in the societies they encountered, these beads arrived as something entirely new, a rain of perfect, unearthly color. Local artisans could not replicate the specific shades or the flawless roundness. This manufactured scarcity, this deliberate creation of an irresistible aesthetic, gave the beads immense value. They were quickly integrated into existing systems of adornment and status, becoming a desired medium of exchange. A handful of certain blue beads could purchase a basket of grain. A string of rare red ones might be traded for a prime animal hide. In some transactions, they were even used in ways that bring profound sadness, exchanged for human labor in unjust systems. This history requires us to look beyond the bead's sparkle to see the calculated economics behind it. European traders had identified a powerful formula: manufacture a desirable, non-essential good that could not be locally reproduced, and you create a permanent market and a tool of leverage. The bead trade was a masterclass in exporting desire itself. It allowed for the extraction of vast resources, from African gold and ivory to American furs, with a currency that cost little to produce but carried immense perceived worth abroad. To dismiss these beads as trivial is to misunderstand the fundamental nature of money. Their value was not inherent in the glass, but in the shared story that communities came to believe about them, a story of rarity, beauty, and connection to a wider world. They demonstrate that currency can be a deliberate invention, a spark of colored glass used to kindle complex fires of commerce, culture, and at times profound historical consequence. The final sparkle of manufactured glass beads brings us to the smallest, most organic unit of value on our list. Our 25th and final standardized commodity is durable seeds and nuts, the miniature banknotes of the local marketplace. Beyond the grand systems built on barley or rice, countless microeconomies thrived on the trade of compact, countable plant products. In the arid oases of the Middle East, dates served as both a sweet staple and a unit of barter. In the Mediterranean, almonds were prized for their portability and long shelf life. But perhaps the most vivid example is the kola nut in West Africa, a stimulant currency that wove together commerce, ceremony, and conversation. These glossy, bitter nuts containing caffeine were cherished not as a food, but as a social lubricant and a gentle stimulant to ward off fatigue. Their value was rooted in this desirable effect, making them a perfect item for gift-giving, sealing agreements, and offering hospitality. For trade, they were counted out in precise, standard quantities, often carried in special woven bags. A handful of nuts could purchase vegetables at a market stall, while a larger sack might be part of a ritual exchange between families. Their durability was key. They could remain fresh and potent for weeks, allowing them to store value reliably. This practice highlights a profound and often overlooked layer of economic history, the world of micro-monies. Not every transaction required the sanction of a king or an imperial granary. In villages, across regional networks, and within specific trade guilds, communities naturally adopted whatever was locally abundant, durable, and mutually desired. A basket of certain seeds, a bundle of specific herbs, a string of particular nuts, these became the accepted tokens for daily life. They supported the vibrant hum of the local market, enabling the exchange of crafts, fresh produce, and small services. These systems existed in parallel to, and often completely independent of, any state-controlled currency. They were money by consensus, grounded in the immediate realities of the environment and social ritual. The kola nut, passed from host to guest or from trader to farmer, was more than a commodity. It was a token of respect and a building block of trust. It reminds us that the essence of money is not in its scale, but in its function as a shared story of value. From a king's treasury of gold ingots to a farmer's pouch of counted seeds, the same principle held true. Any object, if it was durable, divisible, and desired by a community, could become the language of exchange, proving that the human impulse to trade and connect is so powerful it can turn even the smallest seed into a world of its own. That pouch of kola nuts, counted out in a village market, represented a world of decentralized trust, but a single innovation would begin to pull that trust toward a central point of power. The spark of this revolution was struck not in a grand empire, but in the kingdom of Lydia, nestled in the hills of what is now Western Turkey, around the 7th century before the Common Era. Here, someone had a brilliant, pragmatic idea. Instead of traders needing to carry small scales to weigh out bits of gold or silver dust for every purchase, why not pre-weigh and stamp them? The Lydians took electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver found in their riverbeds, and formed it into small, bean-shaped lumps. Then they did something that changed history forever. They pressed an official mark into the metal. This stamp, often a lion's head, was a promise. It certified the weight and the purity of that lump, transferring trust from the merchant's scale to the authority of the king who issued it. This was the birth of the coin. The advantages were immediate and profound. Coins were perfectly portable and uniform. You no longer had to negotiate whether your handful of silver was pure enough. The stamp settled the matter. They were conveniently divisible, with smaller denominations for daily life. And perhaps most ingeniously, that blank space on the metal became a potent new medium, a tiny billboard for state propaganda. A coin could carry the face of a ruler, the symbol of a city god, or an emblem of civic pride, broadcasting power and identity with every transaction. But this revolution was not an overnight switch. For centuries, the old commodity monies and the new coins circulated side by side, like two languages spoken in the same marketplace. In remote villages far from royal mints, people still paid for a chicken with a measure of grain. Specific trades, like the long-distance spice routes or the ceremonial exchanges of the Pacific, continued to operate on their own established standards. The Roman soldier might receive his salary in silver denarii, but he still used some of it to buy salt, that ancient, edible currency. The shift was a slow tide, not a sudden flood. What this transition truly represented was a fundamental change in the nature of value itself. Commodity money held intrinsic value. A sack of barley was valuable because you could eat it. A gold coin, however, held representative value. Its worth was not in the metal alone, though that gave it a foundation, but in the guarantee stamped upon it. You accepted the coin because you trusted the authority behind the lion's head, believing that the next person would also honor that promise. This moved the center of economic gravity from the community's shared need for a useful object to the state's power to enforce a standard. It centralized economic authority, tying the health of commerce directly to political stability. The invention of coinage reminds us that money is never static. It evolves with our technology and our political structures. Yet, through all the transformations from barley to Bitcoin, the core idea remains astonishingly constant. It is always about trust. Whether that trust is placed in the nourishing power of a seed, the gleaming rarity of a shell, or the stamped promise of a king, money is at its heart the story we all agree to tell each other about what is valuable, and that story is the true currency of civilization. That stamped promise of a king was a world away from the first price tag, a simple measure of barley, yet both systems relied on the same profound human agreement. Our journey from grain to coins reveals a fundamental truth. Money is not a thing, but a story. It is anything a society collectively decides to trust as a store of value, a medium of exchange, and a unit of account. The 25 commodities we have explored were not random choices. They were brilliant, pragmatic adaptations. Each one was a perfect answer to a specific set of environmental and social questions. In the fertile river valleys, grain became the edible ledger. Across the open steppes, cattle moved as living capital. Along icy coastlines, dried fish stored the ocean's bounty for lean seasons. These systems were not primitive. They were the invisible architecture upon which ancient civilizations were built. They allowed for the smooth exchange of goods across great distances, turning a local surplus into a ticket to global connection. They enabled the payment of labor on a massive scale, feeding the workers who raised pyramids and ziggurats, and they allowed for the accumulation of wealth beyond mere subsistence, creating the capital needed for art, innovation, and statecraft. Every marketplace, every tax record, every long-distance trade route was made possible by this shared language of value. They set the psychological and practical stage for every financial innovation that followed, from the clay tablet receipt to the digital transaction. So the next time you tap a phone to pay for coffee, pause for a moment. Remember that this act of trust stretches back in an unbroken chain. It connects to the Roman soldier's salt allowance, the Mesopotamian scribe's barley ration, and the Pacific Islander's ceremonial whale tooth. Our modern finance, with all its complexity, still rests on that ancient, simple premise, a community's agreement that something stands for something else. It all began when someone looked at a bag of grain and saw not just tomorrow's meal, but a promise for the future. If this exploration of where money comes from changed how you see the world, consider subscribing for more journeys into the mysteries of our past. And we would love to hear from you. Which of these 25 ancient currencies surprised you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below.